Here we go, and good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How are you, mate? You okay?
I'm very well, very well. How are you?
Very good indeed. Can you see my screen all right? Is the slide showing okay?
No. Yeah, they
No,
are. Yeah.
they
Sorry, I
are.
was on the webinar side. Yeah,
Fine,
but you
fair
can
enough,
toggle
mate.
between both.
Mate, so you've had a busy 24 hours, Bristol yesterday, over to London this morning. So
Yeah,
fancy booking a
obviously,
webinar on a day that you're in Bristol entertaining clients the night before, right?
all part of the fun. Though. Obviously, the highlight of my week was lunch with you on Tuesday. So,
Thank
lunch with you on
you.
Tuesday, up
Thank
to
you.
Blackpool on Tuesday night, Blackpool on Wednesday, Leeds on Wednesday, Bristol Thursday, London today.
Oh my Lord.
All good fun.
Yes, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. I've got a week in the office this week, which has been really nice because we've been Glasgow, we've been Leeds, we've been all over the place. So sometimes it's quite nice to know you're grounded for a week. I say to the wife, you best have some pictures of me around the house because you might forget what I look like soon because I'm here, there, and everywhere. Um, so it's all fun and games. Morning, everybody. Morning, James. Morning, Martin. Morning, Jade. Thank you all for saying hello and good morning. At least we know that's working. We're going to kick things off quite quick today because I know you've got a ton of stuff that you want to get through. I'm really looking forward to today's webinar. When we talk about financial planning and AI, it's very topical. People are either fully bought in and using it. People might be a little bit nervous. So hopefully you give us some good little insights as to what the benefits are of using AI within your business. So as always, we plan for the webinar to run for the full hour. If you do want to hang around and ask any questions, I'm sure Tom will have time towards the end. If not, there'll be plenty of ways that you can get in contact with us at the club or Tom at Saturn. So do just make the most of your time with us today. There's a couple of ways that you can interact with us. You've got the chat function, which people are using. If not, you've got the Q&A section, which keeps things a little bit more anonymous. As always, feedback is important to us. At the end, when you exit the webinar, there will be a little bit of a feedback form that we'd love for you to participate in. It just gives you the feedback on Tom, the presentation, the content within the presentation as well to make sure it's relevant to your needs. There'll be a way that you can arrange a conversation with Saturn, and there's ways that you can interact with the club as well. So please do participate in the feedback and let us know how we're doing. It is the only way we get to improve in this wonderful world if you let us know how we're doing. So look, let's get straight into it. I just want to touch briefly on the club. Everything that we do is based on structure, it's based on guidance, clarity, and most of all, accountability to make everything in your business possible and achievable. Some see us as a non-exec direct, some use us as an absolute agony aunt. Either way, we can play a good role for you at the club. Everything remains the same for us, usually starting with a 3-year business plan. We break it down into a 12-month roadmap, then again into smaller 90-day sprints. You could be looking at the growth aspect of your business, you could be looking at operations, you could be looking at tech, you could be looking at the people and culture. Either way, we're here to help your business thrive. So if you want to know more about the club, please do get in touch. Outside of the membership within the club, we wanted to build a community that works for absolutely everybody. Some of you would have very much come from our WhatsApp groups. They're absolutely buzzing 90% of the time. It's quick answers, no fluff, just meaningful conversations that help you solve problems on the go. As you are here today on our webinars, expert-led, Tom with us today from Saturn, really practical, really interactive, and CPD accredited. So at the end of today, hopefully, you'll receive an email from us as to how you can retrieve your CPD certificate. Face-to-face events, we love them. We're doing more and more throughout the UK now. As mentioned, we was in Leeds a couple of weeks ago. We are in Birmingham at the end of November, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. Podcast is going really, really well. Probably about 60 episodes into our podcast now, where you can hear from business owners, the highs, the lows, the successes and the struggles that they face within their businesses. So you can get those on all of your normal platforms like your Spotify and your Amazon Music, wherever they may be. And we also run our CEO quarterly roundtables. So, this is more strategic, high level discussions for business owners who are looking to make real good decisions within their business to keep pushing their business forward. So quite a few ways that people can now interact with the club, which is very good. Touching on briefly the event that we got coming up, as mentioned, we've done Leeds. We're now in Birmingham on Friday, the 28th of November. You will see Tom in the flesh. I think Tom is coming along. You are going to be there, Tom, right?
I am indeed very much looking forward to it. Because my
Fantastic.
colleague Gabby was in the at the Leeds event. She said it was great. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
good room. So good energy as well, which we like.
you let me down. You didn't, but I won't. I won't. You know, I won't. Well, I won't bring it up again. I promise. So at the end of the webinar, on the feedback form, it will say, "Do you want to come to our event?" We mean the Birmingham event. So if you are in the local area or you can commute to Birmingham, please hit yes, and we will send you the details to our next event. But just touching on it briefly, the agenda is absolutely stacked. We're going to kick it off with a personal motivators session, really enabling you to rediscover your why through. It's a really interactive session. We'll then look at strategies to win and retain clients across multiple generations. We've got the great wealth transfer coming. We need to be engaged in different generations. And then we finish off with building a client referral scheme that actually works. So everything we do at our events is collaborative and interactive. Sitting and listening is simply not possible. 5 hours of CPD, and it is completely free. And we've got some networking and some drinks afterwards. So if you're around on the 28th of November, please do let us know on the feedback form. We just got 2 sessions coming up this October. I do believe we've got a third soon as well, so we'll let you know about that. But on Friday the 17th, so next Friday at 10 a.m, no rest for the wicked, Tom. I'm here every Friday 10 a.m. We're joined by Bearrock for a session on reimagining PI insurance. So we're going to explore how firms can take control over their data to really reduce premiums, which is music to a lot of people's ears. We're going to improve cover and move PI from being just a cost to a genuine strategic asset. You have to make sure you got your teeth in for that sentence. We then move on Thursday, the 23rd of October at 4 p.m. I know what you're thinking. It's not Friday at 10 a.m. But Money Coaching Institute joins us as we talk about understanding the dynamics of couples and money. Reason why we've got somebody tuning in from LA, I believe, California. So we've had to adjust for the time zone difference. So that's at 4 p.m. on Thursday, the 23rd. So really looking at how relationships and money behaviors intersect and how advisors can support clients in achieving more balanced, empathetic conversations about money. So that one is going to be a highlight of the month as well. The last one we done was an absolute hit. So you can rewatch any of those webinars on our website as well. Just touched on briefly the collaborators. As you all know, we couldn't do what we do without the incredible support of all of our collaborators. Every one of these businesses play a key role in helping our members navigate change and unlock new opportunities. So whether you're looking at sort of tech, training, marketing, compliance, GDPR, recruitment, whatever it may be, we've got a collaborator in the club that can support your business. So a huge thank you and a well-deserved shout out to everybody collaborating with the club. So that moves us on to today, Tom, when the next slide kicks in. There we go. So Tom is one of the founding team members at Saturn. You lead strategic partnerships across the financial advice industry. You've got a background in asset management and as an experienced advisor yourself, so you've seen it from the other side, and now you're trying to help build bridges and make advice more seamless, which is really, really nice. So Tom combines technical expertise with first-hand knowledge of the advice process. So when everybody registered for the webinar, we did ask a handful of questions. So I just want to relay that back to you so you can see the outputs of those questions. So we asked firms about their biggest compliance challenges, and the results were consistent across the board. So most are directly authorized, managing compliance in-house. And the same frustrations came up time and time again, which is duplication, complexity, feeling bogged down by manual processes, constraints on the FCA updates, and are probably stuff that you're used to hearing all the time for people that might not have embedded AI into their business, or definitely on that journey of embedding AI into the business and probably coming out the other end and not seeing some of these burdens as much, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's a lot of similarities from what I tend to see across lots of different firms. We're going to talk a lot today about what I think ultimately the root causes of those kind of inefficiencies ultimately are.
Yeah.
I think there'll be quite a lot of similarities to the Bear Rock conversation, to be honest. I mean, like data clarity, data transparency, single source of the truth, everyone likes to talk about. And there's a multitude of different benefits to that outcome, right? If you've got a single hub of your data, then guess what? It's much more transparent. And therefore, there's compliance benefits, there's advice efficiency benefits, there's client benefits. So today we'll focus on the kind of compliance angle of that. But I know we did a webinar a couple of months ago, Lee, didn't we? And we talked about kind of how I think that's going to generate better client outcomes. So I think you can put lots of different spins on the ultimate truth, which is that people want better access and control over their data.
100%. I think sometimes we can look at a financial planning business, if you like, and everything's fluffy and beautiful sitting over here. Then just on its own, separated is compliance. And that's just making sure we're doing what we should be doing and we're ticking the right boxes and we're staying above board and we're staying compliant. But it's really bringing that in so that everything's working together and not in silos. Compliance can be a huge benefit for your business if it's walking and talking down the same road as you. It really, really can. So it's about just aligning the compliance into your full advice business and not seeing it as a burden, but just more strategic within your business as well, which is going to be really, really awesome. I will stop sharing my screen. I will let you take over. And as always, if anybody's got any questions throughout the presentation, please do just let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to echo that, would love people to jump in with questions, comments, thoughts, challenges as well. Like we're really keen to hear kind of people's opinions and thoughts on this sort of stuff. So, as Lee's wonderful introduction says, my name's Tom. I'm part of the founding team here at Saturn. I was the first ever employee, so I've seen it grow from kind of very early stage tech startup to kind of where we are today. So, if you've not heard of Saturn, we are a financial planning specific AI operating system. We work with about 600 businesses across the country now from all shapes and sizes, really. We work with one advisor firms all the way through to nationals and networks. And there's a lot of similarities, I suppose, in terms of the issues that firms face. It's advisor capacity, it's the time that it takes for advice to be delivered. So fundamentally, we want to help tackle, as Lee mentioned at the start, that opportunity to seize this wealth capture that we're seeing at the moment, this generational wealth transfer between the baby boomers and probably Lee's generation and younger generations as well, which is, there we go, which I think is super exciting. Like I think fundamentally, there's never been a better time to be in financial advice. There's opportunities galore, and there is now technology, hopefully, which is going to help businesses start to capture that. One thing I should just probably correct: I'm not an experienced advisor. I'm qualified as an advisor. I've never actually given advice, so
Right.
I've spent my career working with financial planners, from working within it financial planning businesses to get my qualifications, but then largely more on the kind of asset management sales side. So I've seen firsthand a lot of the pain, I suppose, in terms of kind of implementation and delivery. And I think the perception of compliance is shifting fundamentally within the financial advice industry, which I think is great. When I was back at my asset management sales days, we referred unfortunately to compliance as business prevention officers, and I think that was probably something that people have heard previously. And
Yeah.
unfortunately it's a truth that compliance ultimately is a step in the process to be able to get things done.
Yeah.
And the problem that compliance teams face is the lack of transparency around what's being done within businesses, and therefore they have to cause friction in that process to make sure we're compliant at all times. What we're going to talk about today is a fundamental shift in that mindset to see compliance as a real opportunity to reduce costs with rock wealth and PI insurance. There's so much things I think that ultimately compliance is going to be a real winner of the AI revolution that we're going through. So looking forward to diving into that today.
And just quickly, I bet your conversations from 2 years ago to where you are today, have come on so far, haven't they? I could imagine at first it was a lot of nervousness, a lot of what is it, what does it do? There was a big talk about how it's going to put so many people out of jobs, and the AI is going to replace power planners, and all this other nonsense that comes with it. And how has that been for you in the role that you play, from the conversations that you had when it first launched to where you are today? Is things getting easier for you talking to firms about AI?
I wouldn't say easier because I think there's still a kind of major shift in terms of the capabilities of AI,
Yeah.
and therefore almost the complexity of the conversations are getting more complex, not less complex. Because
Okay.
I suppose the word that springs to mind is kind of maturity. Like AI as a system is maturing at an ever increasing rate. It means that both AI in our industry is becoming more accessible, is
Mm.
becoming more complex in terms of what it can do. It's shifting from where we started, which is basic meeting note transcription, which is a kind of more simple plug and play. I saw in the attendees there's a couple of Saturn co-planners from some of our clients in today, so it's good to see that people are using that. But turning on a meeting note system is a fairly simple process to get your head around and a fairly simple thing for teams to adopt.
Mm.
What we're now starting to see is that with the complexity of AI integration into the advice process going deeper, i.e., looking at suitability reports, compliance automation, actually what we're now seeing is quite a big shift in processes.
Mm.
And that comes with some pain. So I think actually the complexity of the conversation is getting more. I do think, though, that one of the things that has shifted quite a lot over the last 2 years is the sentiment on the advice side. I think when we first started to talk about AI with financial advisors, it was really those early adopters that were very excited about it. There's a couple
Yeah.
of advisors that spring to mind that were very eager to just start playing with things and testing things and seeing if
Mm.
things work.
Yeah.
That's a kind of luxury those businesses had, but it's not really a luxury. A lot of businesses had that kind of time to actually test stuff and play around with things.
Yeah.
What we're now seeing kind of outside of the financial planning industry is that AI is becoming completely embedded into everything that we do. It's very rare now you speak to someone that they've not played around with ChatGPT or they've not played around with
This
Copilot.
is it.
And therefore that intrigue, I suppose, is much higher than it was 2 years ago. So,
Yeah.
there's some of those factors that I think is making conversation easier because it's not a what is AI conversation. People are kind of understanding it. But I think the complexity of the conversations is definitely increasing.
And sorry if you cover this off, but is it something that you can start off slow and steady, or have you got to jump in with both feet? And can you just say, right, let's just start? Because people just start with me. Some people aren't even transcribing meeting notes, right? They're still pen and paper. They're still very much head down. I couldn't think of anything worse. I was scrambling around the other day looking for a pen because I had a meeting that wasn't my meeting, and I weren't allowed to use my Copilot. So I was just like, I need a pen. And I found a letter, as I was making notes on the back of a letter, because I just simply don't have a book anymore. But I suppose, can you start off slow and steady, or have you got to embrace it and jump in with both feet?
Yeah, it's funny you bring up that. I was literally this more. My brother got engaged last week, and his engagement party tonight. And I got in the cars, and I was like, I actually don't remember the last time I wrote something down.
Yeah, I know.
Just kind of like moving into this world where everything's transcribed and captured, and it's great. Like we're starting to see humans being used to talk
Yeah,
more and think more rather than kind of writing and creating stuff.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, like in terms of how I see firms approaching it, I think actually coming to providers like us or Aveni or Planet Power Advisory AI or even just looking at Microsoft Copilot to say kind of what can AI do for me is almost the wrong approach. I think
Mm.
actually what businesses should fundamentally be doing is thinking internally of, do we have the right people in the right positions to be able to make process change effective? What processes then do we have within our business? Is that really clearly documented? And is there any opportunities for those processes to be improved? And once you've got the right people in there and you've got the processes really thought through, documented, articulated across the business and agreed as well, everyone understands, what the onboarding process is for the Lee financial planning business, something like that. Then starting to think about how AI can empower those processes is definitely a more effective way of approaching AI. Um, what I mean by that, I suppose, is that we have a lot of businesses that come to us to say, look, we really struggle with client onboarding. It takes us way too long to onboard clients. I spoke to an advisor a couple of weeks ago that said, Tom, I'm not taking on any new business. It's just too much work. And that's a
Really?
really sad state for our
Yeah,
industry to
it
be in
is. Yeah.
ultimately. Like if we are trying to bridge this advice gap and bridge this opportunity, I suppose that's in the market at the moment that people want to get financial
Mm.
advice, then we need to make it more accessible. And that's by removing a lot of these friction points. So
Yeah.
my challenge to businesses and people on the call would be like, what are the friction points within your advice process? Let's get those agreed, and then let's
Mm.
try and find some tech solutions for it. Because
Yeah.
I think
As I say, I think
strongly,
people have just got to be intrigued, and I think if you are intrigued, and this isn't, don't, hope no one takes this the wrong way, but if you are intrigued, I think you're a person that I would reach out to of interest to say, look, what are other people doing? How are they doing it? how are they looking after so many clients? How are they onboarding so many new clients? And how are they doing so many reviews? Because you're probably seeing what good practice looks like in firms that are using AI properly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose, I would say yes, that's definitely something we can help. Like we've, as you say, we work with 600 device businesses.
Yeah,
There's loads of lessons that we've had from that.
of
Mistakes that
course there
Saturn
is.
have made in terms of
Absolutely.
implementing improvements that we've seen businesses do, some really slick processes, maybe some systems and processes that
Mm,
could be improved. But I
mm,
think actually this for me is about community. And just to add the compliment back to you, I suppose one of the things I love about the Financial Planning Club is that sense of community. Those when we went for lunch on Tuesday, you were saying those WhatsApp chats, there's people just pinging things off left, right, and center about, how are other businesses doing this? And for
100%.
us, that community aspect is super important. As you said last night, I was in Bristol at a client dinner, and the conversation was other businesses talking to other businesses about how they're using AI and what their processes are, what their pain points are.
Yeah,
Like I think fundamentally our industry is fairly unique that collaboration is something that people really, really want to do.
yeah.
And there are businesses at all stages of this process, right? Some have
Mm,
dipped their toe in the water with meeting note transcription. Some have gone fully fledged automated suitability report writing. There's
yeah,
people that in the industry would also love to help each other. So I think
cool.
that community aspect and kind of sharing the learnings is key.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's a great webinar, Tom. Thanks for your time. Let's get going. Sorry, guys, if we took a bit of your time there, but I suppose one of those conversations I could talk for hours on because it's just forever evolving, isn't it? But yeah, let's do
Absolutely,
it.
absolutely. Well, let's just start off with a couple of learning objectives. Obviously, as Lee mentioned, it's a CPD qualifying webinar today. So, three key learning objectives that we're going to run through. One is to reimagine the advice process through the principle of compliance by design. And what I mean by that, and we'll explore that kind of concept, I suppose, as we go through the webinar today, is we touched on it a little bit briefly, but compliance has always been a step in the advice journey. It's always been, we collect the client data, we look at the recommendations, we put together a suitability report, compliance rubber stamp it, and then we're away. It becomes that friction point in the advice process. What we're now seeing with AI is that actually compliance can almost be like an invisible thread throughout the entire advice journey. And therefore, compliance by design is that every step of that advice process we go through, compliance has oversight, transparency, access to information. The risk of the advice comes down. And I think really importantly, the time to deliver advice comes down. So we're seeing in the market at the moment the average time to deliver financial advice being 33 days. And I was doing a talk at the Bombs conference a couple of weeks ago and was talking about this. And that statistic is exactly the same as it was 5 years ago. So in
Okay.
2019, there was also a research report done on the time it takes to give financial advice. And the answer was there's like a day or so difference, but very, very similar to where it is today. So ultimately, we're not being able to deliver advice any quicker than we were 5 years ago. So one of my kind of theories, I suppose, is that by spreading compliance through the end-to-end advice process, we can remove one of those potential steps in the process, and therefore we can consolidate the time it takes to deliver advice. So we
Mm,
explore that a little bit more as we go through. Second is how AI can act as a de-risking mechanism. Rockwell, I'm sure, knowing John and spoken to him about this, they're going to go into a lot of detail about transparency of data, accessibility of information, and how they as an insurer will look at that as a business. For us, that's a really important part of this step. Like
mm.
de-risking financial advice is going to do two things. It's going to make it more accessible and it's going to make it more cost effective. And those are both things that advisors, business owners, operations teams are all going to be hopefully very excited about.
Mm.
And for us, fundamentally, there's a lot of conversation in the market around AI and speed. You know, do your meeting note in 5 minutes, get a suitability report done in 10 minutes. Like I've never associated financial planning with speed. And speed is not a word that I think financial planning should really be pushing for AI.
Yeah,
For me, it's ultimately this shift from speed to trust. Like, yes, reducing the time it takes to do a meeting note from half an hour to 10 minutes is great. Reducing the time it takes to do a suitability report from an hour or 2 hours down to 30 minutes is all great. And these are all efficiency savings, but what we also need to make sure is we're continuing to do things in the right way.
yeah.
Like something that's been crystal clear to me from the conversation I have with firms is that that standard that firms want to adhere to is not going anywhere, right? They're not gonna kind of let that be eroded just because they want to find some shortcuts through using AI. So we need to make sure that when we're implementing AI into businesses, we're doing it from a position of trust. And that's where I think compliance needs to be in the conversation, not part of the conversation.
Yeah, it doesn't impact your standards, does it? Let's be honest. It'll just speed things up slightly for them. So that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just a bit of an agenda in terms of a structure. So we'll start off by looking at kind of the industry today, like where compliance is, some of the issues I see around data and its integral role in transparency. We'll start to move through there. And then a lot of the conversation I want to have, and this was feedback from Lee, I think, was proper examples of where I'm seeing AI being used effectively for compliance teams. So we'll start to talk to for the main part of the webinar, I suppose, on reimagining advice built with compliance by design.
Love that.
I want to start off with a poll though, because I'm really keen to see kind of where firms are, I suppose, in terms of their AI journey. So we'd love to know which best describes your firm's current approach to AI in advice. And I think Lee's going to bring up a poll through Zoom here. So we'll see some live answers coming in.
There we go. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Do you think we're heading towards sort of AI being embedded in all workflows? Do you think we'll get a point
Yeah.
where it's just? I mean, we're seeing it in everyday life now, aren't we? You know, you can be watching a video on social media and you kind of second guess, is that real or is that AI? You know, it's just it is everywhere. But do you think it will be in end-to-end workflows within a business within financial planning soon?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing this more in other industries at the moment. I mean, the healthcare industry is full steam ahead on AI. There's some
Mm.
incredible things that the healthcare industry are doing around cancer detection and things like that, which is, it's becoming a necessity to have as opposed to a kind of nice to have. I think in financial advice, it's kind of a nice to have right now. Like businesses are exploring it, they're excited about it, they're starting to implement it. I mean, you can see that from the poll results there, right? There's 25% not using it at all, 32% testing it in small ways. So over half of the people that are on the webinar today are not really fully implementing AI in their processes. There's kind of a half there, right? There's
Yeah.
36 that are using it in some parts. So they're dipping their toe in the water and starting to explore it. I would imagine that's through meeting note transcription and maybe a couple of other things. And people that have actually embedded it as a key part of their workflow is just 2 out of 28. So
Yeah.
7% of people on the call today have really gone through that process change to get AI embedded into everything we do. Like I think it's inevitable. Like I think AI is coming into everything that we do. Interesting, you talked about AI generated videos and whether they're real or not. I watched a video on Twitter. It's a very big segue, but I was watching a video this morning and there was a skate off between Donald Trump and Joe Biden in the White House.
Brilliant.
I was like, I'm pretty sure that's AI, but yeah,
Yeah, well, I don't know. Anything's possible these days, and I love that. The people not using it or testing it in a small way. What an opportunity, them guys have got to really have a look at AI and what it can do for their business. And I'd also love to hear from anybody that's dipping their toe in or have it fully embedded. Do you have any pain points with it? Do you have any frustrations? If you do, Tom's your man. Get him over, and he'll see what he can do to help you. Sorry to put you on the spot there, but there's two ends of the spectrum here. It's people that have never used it, and it'd be great to actually walk them through how impressive it can be, and how efficient it can be within your business as well. So yeah, the results are in. So thank you very much for getting involved in that. And it is a clear divide, isn't it? People just not using it or slightly testing it to be a bit more adventurous with it, which is good.
Yeah, I think it's kind of comes back to capacity as well. Right? I mean, some firms have the luxury of having operations teams and people that have got the capacity to think about AI and test things as well.
Yeah,
Because what you don't want to do is to just start shoving AI into stuff when you're running at 110 miles an hour every day.
yeah,
And it's kind of a bit of a recipe for failure. So, some firms have got the ability to be more of an early adopter and test things and implement things in their
also,
business, and other things are just kind of saying, look, let's just wait and see how other businesses do with this, and then let's
yeah,
wait until it's in a position where we can just kind of more plug and play.
yeah,
So yeah,
100%.
entirely up to firms. I mean, you asked a question earlier, Lee, about kind of phasing the implementation of AI. There's lots of different ways you can approach that. So yeah, we can explore that on another call.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
just quickly for context, I think why is AI important in financial advice today? There's almost kind of a carrot and a stick. I said at the start that I think there's never been a better time to be in financial advice. There's an estimated 8 million adults in the country at the moment that want financial advice, and they have the investable means to kind of hit some of those minimum requirements that a lot of firms have to have in place from a pure economics perspective. But there just isn't the supply, I suppose, exposure from our side to be able to work with those clients. So
Mm.
if we can increase advisor capacity, there's a lot of opportunity for people to expand businesses and obviously deliver more or better client outcomes for people. And then there's the kind of stick approach. And we've seen a lot of regulation coming into our industry. We were born in July 2023, very much consumer duty era. I think albeit a very well-intentioned piece of legislation that was coming in. And what it's done is it shifted compliance regulations from kind of rules-based systems more to outcomes-based systems. So more than you need to do X, Y, Z across the advice process. If you really look at the consumer duty legislation, it's thinking about fair value and best client outcomes and things. I think that's a really positive step forward. If we, as an industry, are and as we are laser focused on helping clients achieve their goals and objectives and ultimately their financial planning outcomes, then compliance should be the same. If we can make sure that compliance is focused on obsession around customer satisfaction and client outcomes, that for me is a really good shift in terms of the regulation.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's another piece of legislation, it's another reporting requirement, it's causing more friction and blockers. Three-quarters of advice firms from the latest Next Wealth report are seeing less clients post consumer duty. So again, just kind of scene setting, I think compliance is unfortunately still being a bit of a blocker in the advice journey.
Yeah.
Um, and I'd love to again just have a quick poll as well. Like where do people on the call today feel the most friction across their advice process?
Mm.
Start to see some answers coming in, I think. So where do you feel the most friction in your advice process today? Data gathering, fact finding, I was expecting that to be high. Report writing for sure.
Where
Compliance
would you
reviews and
say,
sign off.
what do you see as being sort of the biggest bottlenecks for businesses, Tom, that are either looking to scale or grow?
I think it's report writing. Like I think
Yeah.
the vast majority of businesses I speak to have a backlog of reports.
Yeah.
Very, very, very rare. In fact, I'm not sure I spoke to a firm yet that don't have any reports left to write. There's always this backlog, and it's because there's so much work that goes into producing reports. And I
Yeah.
think, to be very honest, I think it's the annual review letter that's causing a lot of friction. It's a document that is confirming ongoing suitability of a client's circumstances. The advisor has gone to see that client and they're having to produce what is quite a lengthy document just to confirm the conversation they've already had.
Yeah.
And most of the time, the client gets that document and goes, "Yeah, Lee, we spoke about this. Like, I know this. I
Yeah.
trust you."
Yeah.
That's it's again back to that point of trust. The annual review letter is about 80% of the work that we see advice firms doing in terms of power planners, administrators, report writers in general. And if we can start to chip away at that and reduce that time it takes to do those, there's a lot more capacity that we'll see coming into businesses. So really not surprised by the kind of poll outcome that I suppose there, which is 56% of people saying that report writing
Mm.
suitability letters is a big kind of bottleneck in the advice process.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Thanks again, everyone, for getting involved in today's polls.
Absolutely. And ultimately, the reason why I see this happening is because of this setup that I see most firms using from a tech perspective. Ultimately, I mean, if you think about the way that advice firms have grown their tech proposition over the years, they've usually started with, or maybe a spreadsheet, but they've moved into a CRM system.
Mm.
And there's a lot of really good CRM systems out there in the market, but not every firm uses them for everything, and they don't always love all of the features that those CRM systems have. So, a good example could be Intelligent Office is a great way of storing client data and doing fee reconciliation, but maybe the firm don't love the client experience of the personal finance portal. So
Mm.
they work with a firm like Money Info, where you can get a really slick looking client portal, but it's a separate system to Intelligent Office. And then back into IO, you're using IntelliFlow cash flow reports, but actually you quite like the way that Cash Calc or Voyant do it. So you start to use that system. And again, you've segmented your client data. And again, for risk profiling, we're using Dynamic Planner. There's so many different pieces of tech. And Dimensional have done this latest research piece that says there's 10.7 on average pieces of tech that a financial advisor or advice
Mm.
business will use across this advice process. And whilst we're using tech to solve some of the pain points in our business, the ultimate problem is that we're creating hugely fragmented data across our systems. And it means that the outcome is that the people within our teams, our human beings in our teams, are now working like machines. They are manually typing data into systems and manually moving information from IO to Money Info to Cash Calc to Voyant to Dynamic Planner to Transacts. This is the work that a lot of people are having to do.
Yeah.
It's hugely, hugely time consuming, and ultimately it creates a lot of risk. There's a lot of human error associated with that. There's ultimately it takes a long time, and let's be very honest, it's quite boring work, I think, as well. So, what I think we see the future of is starting to use AI systems to centralize all of this client data into one single source of truth or central data source. So the way that we work and the way that I think financial advice businesses should be thinking about AI and tech implementation is by fully mapping out the end-to-end advice process. So on screen is a kind of fairly basic run through of where I see the different steps across the advice journey, from onboarding clients, doing the fact find, relationship building piece, through into the actual kind of suitability process where you're looking at cash flow, suitability reports in terms of implementation, and then that key pillar of compliance check, file checking, meeting observations. What we tend to see at the moment is that firms operate on this kind of 10% model, 10% of file checks, 10% meeting observations.
Yeah,
It means, unfortunately, some things can be missed.
yeah,
We are human beings at the end of the day. Our skill
yeah.
set is in our empathy, in our kind of decision-making processes, in our relationship building. It's not necessarily in the relentless data processing that businesses have to do, and there's risk associated with that in potential areas. So I think things do get missed, and that's why, PI insurance could be quite high. And then we move into the kind of review process. A lot of the work that teams are doing in reviews is spotting differences or changes in client circumstances. And we have to then produce a report to reflect those changes in circumstances, but we also have to go and update all of our data. So take the data from the meeting, update the systems, make sure that's reflected. For us across this entire process, AI is going to fundamentally change the way that this flow works. So back into the onboarding process, using systems that can do meeting note transcription, but are specific to financial advice and can therefore take this information and move it into a very structured fact find format, removes the pain of the advisor having to get their meeting, do their meeting notes, putting it into a fact find. One of the major pain points I see in that process actually is around this support handover piece. One of the big bottlenecks, I think, is this process of an advisor collecting meeting note information and then passing it into the rest of the team. For one of two reasons. One, it takes too much time because the advisor's busy, and that's ultimately what we want. We want them out with people. We don't want them writing meeting notes,
Yeah.
but they have this backlog of notes they need to go and write up before it can go into the power planner. So we see this time delay.
Mm.
They then invariably, we're all humans again, can't remember everything in that meeting. So maybe
Yeah.
something was missed. And maybe the quality of the output from the notes varies quite drastically across advisors. Um, and people on the webinar will know some advisors that are very, very good and meticulous at their meeting notes. But the problem with that is it takes them too long and they're not out with clients. And then there's the other
Listen,
end of that spectrum where advisors
100%.
aren't great at it and they have to
Yeah.
kind of, read a note that they can't quite understand.
To add to that, we run sort of multiple surveys, if you like. One in particular in the power planner community that we've got. So we've got over 500 power planners in the community, right? So I love to run little surveys and just see how they are, where they're at, and what the pain points are. We run it through Microsoft Forms, and when it collates the information, it does the word chart, if you like. The biggest pain point that power planners face in their day-to-day job, the most used word or the most commonly used word is advisor, funny enough. It's, if you had a magic wand, what would one thing you'd change about your profession or whatever it was? Most of it all stems back to the advisor and meeting notes, just to get them quicker, to get more information, not just hard facts, soft facts, just better note taking to compile better reports. To ultimately help them build better rapport with the clients as well, because a lot of the time the relationship doesn't just stop with the advisor. A lot of the time, these power planners have got very good relationships with the clients as well. So yeah, we see and hear that hell of a lot.
Yeah, and that point around power planners, administrators having good relationships with clients is something I'm really excited about. If we think if there are administrators, power planners that are concerned about AI taking their jobs, I would challenge that to say, well, I think they are going to replace some of the stuff that you do for sure.
Mm.
But do you want to be spending your time manually typing data into systems, or do you want to be focused on complex report writing, reasoning, logic around the advice that's
Yeah.
being given, or maybe using some of that capacity to be out with clients and understanding the process it's going to go through? I think businesses have an amazing opportunity to rethink the client experience
Mm.
by increasing the capacity of humans within their business. And I think that's a much more positive spin to put on the kind of AI is going to take my job discussion that
100%.
obviously is going to happen in the industry.
Here's something for you quickly. if a lot of people have sort of call recording, meeting notes as standard procedure with AI taking a lot of the transcript away from that as well. What if someone's got a genuine fear that some of the client conversations are not compliant conversations? Do you know what I mean? It's, if you're having that meeting and the conversations how you normally have a conversation could be, some of these clients are their mates, people they'll have a beer with down the pub or whatever, and sometimes that language or that terminology or that friendship might stem into a meeting or whatever. What is it? How can someone overcome that fear that their conversations are not necessarily compliant?
Yeah, I don't think with that context that advisors are, with their mates kind of having financial planning discussions, it means that they're not going to be compliant. Because I think at all times, advisors are doing what they need to do in terms of the regulations and extracting the right information and understanding changing circumstances and risk capacity and all that sort of stuff. I think advisors are just very skilled at being able to do that organically without really having to think about it. And I think the key thing there is that element of trust. The most important thing is that this is not starting to be seen as some kind of big brother that's there to interrogate you on your meeting and you haven't done
Yeah,
this, you haven't done that. What it
yeah,
is there is to quietly sit in the background and provide the
mm,
advisor support so they can be the human, so they can go and have that conversation with the client and let the conversation go off into weird and wonderful areas of their relationship. But for me, it's that AI should sit quietly in the background and let the advisor be the human in the process. And
yeah,
I think, if we can even use AI to suggest things that advisors can do in their next meeting, for example, then there's a really good opportunity to elevate the quality of meetings. And
yeah.
that's a really exciting opportunity, both for existing seasoned advisors. If you speak to them, they will always say, oh yeah, right,
Mm,
there's things that I do now which maybe I need to remember I need to do in the future. It's like learning to drive a car, right? You learn to pass and then you kind of get into your rhythm with it. But also with new advisors coming in, like we
mm.
need new advisors coming into the industry
Of course we
and
do.
being able to use AI to massively speed up the process of which they are trained and they get that qualified advisor status. Like that's a really exciting opportunity as well. And ultimately, I
Someone's
think,
I was just
sorry,
say
go ahead.
someone's mentioned that one concern is with client relationships is that clients think that every conversation is advice, when in real in reality 80% is probably just data harvest and guidance, and really how AI can help with that. And I suppose a lot of firms, you know, do a lot of financial planning before writing any kind of reports, don't they? Really, so off the back of the meeting note, off the back of the meeting with the AI transcription, and it's really compiling that financial plan, which is non-product specific. It's not advice. It's just kind of regurgitated everything that was mentioned and said and discussed in that meeting to say, right, this is your current circumstances, this is your goals, your objectives, this is what you want to achieve, this is everything that we took from this meeting. Is that correct? Any amendments? Right, now we can go to work and start putting the reports together. Is that in a roundabout way how you see it as well?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a capturing a fair reflection of the conversation that was had and
Mm,
enabling that data to be extracted from that conversation as quickly as possible. So the team back at HQ can get on with the work of producing that report, wherever it's going to be, and the advisor can move on to the next interaction. I think all of that is definitely true. But ultimately, I think AI for us is this new kind of electricity that's going to be touching everything that we do. And I think compliance is ultimately going to be a huge winner in that process.
yeah,
I think if we think about where AI has come from, it's quite interesting how closely it resonates with compliance within the industry because, software 1.0, as we call it, is the very basic use of computing. It's the ability to have very strict and regimented rules-based systems where, we use algorithms, for example, with zeros and ones to do
mm,
a very basic output. This is where computing very much started. It's very basic. It's very rules-based systems. It's the early stage computing, as I mentioned. That for me is kind of where compliance has been in the past. It's very regimented. It's ticked boxes. It's file checks, all this sort of stuff. I think as we start to see how AI is evolving, we can start to also contextualize where I think compliance is going to be evolving to as well. And the second section of starting to think about algorithmic trading, starting to think about predictive models, training on large data sets, that's software 2.0. This is kind of before AI, but we started to see some of those reasoning models start to come into the industry. I think if compliance had that ability to shift from kind
mm,
of management information, KPIs, retrospective checks start to be a little bit more proactive. Like that's where I think compliance can start to move to. And then ultimately the kind of exciting third step, which is where we are building at the moment, is kind of software 3.0. Like AI now has the ability to think on its own. We train it on parameters and put guardrails in place for it to think in a way that we would like it to and to shape its thinking. But ultimately, it's natural and it's intuitive. It's very creative in the way that AI starts to think about the data it's got access to and provide insights and feedback. That's where I think compliance is going to move to. The ability for compliance systems to think and to challenge with reasoning based on data and experience that it's got. So this shift back with consumer duty from previously a rules-based compliance environment to an outcomes-based rules environment. Outcome needs the ability to think actually around rules. Software started like that. AI was in its infancy, machines, computers, binary outcomes, ones and zeros. Now we're seeing it evolving into lateral thinking and reasoning. That's where compliance is going to be moving to, I think, in the not so distant future.
Yeah.
And ultimately, where we've seen that in AI, just to kind of provide, and I think for firms on the call that are thinking about how to get started with AI, this is how AI has been phased into all of the businesses that I work with ultimately. Phase one is all about capturing high quality client data. So meeting intelligence tools, we would call it a transcription tool, creating file notes, improving quality of data in CRM systems by building CRM bridges, industry specific integrations, as I mentioned, and then another large data source that compliance doesn't have access to right now is all of the wonderful documents that providers love to send us. Pension statements, valuations, KYC, AML, all of these documents have a range of client data that firms have to go through with a fine-tooth comb to kind of understand what's in there. AI can do that automatically now. So upload documents, extract data from it, challenge that against fact-find information, see where the discrepancies of client data is, and make sure that's all in file. That's where we are today. Phase two is around workflow automation, which for me is like, what do we use this data for?
Mm.
Once we have all of this data available to us, where can we then start to use that to empower different parts of our processes? And that's where suitability report writing starts to come in. And for us, like it's not just about speed, as I mentioned. This compliance by design mindset that we have, and I think the industry in terms of AI implementation needs to have, is by making sure that compliance is central pillar to AI automation around suitabilities. Meeting notes is not a regulatory required action. A suitability letter is. You have to think differently about it. So the way that we've approached that is by acquiring ATA. There are lots of very good templating systems out there, Genovo being one, ATA being another, quite legacy technology, but they are very good at compliant and regimen outcomes. So if anyone on the call's heard of them, but you can build your own templates. It has a rules-based system where it will automatically update overnight if the regulations change. The problem with those systems is it still takes a long time for firms to go and personalize them. They have to take that kind of bare bones framework and then add all of the client context in there, which still takes quite a lot of time. So very good at compliance, very poor at personalization. If you think about where AI is right now, it's almost the complete opposite end of that spectrum.
Yeah.
It's hugely focused on personalized client information, goals, objectives, all that kind of client rhetoric that can be pulled out of a meeting note, but it doesn't have the compliance framework built into it. So what I think firms need to do is to marry those two approaches up. So not to make it too much about Saturn, but the reason why we made that ATIP acquisition is to bring that compliance experience in-house. So we can build suitability letters, recommendation letters, annual review letters based on a compliance framework, but injecting all of that personalized information that AI can bring into that process. And for me, that's where AI is going to be really, really impactful. It's compliant, but it's also hugely personalized. And client experience is always the main thing that I speak to firms about and that firms raise with me. And the third phase that firms are going to start working with, and there's quite a few businesses now that are exploring this already, is automating case checking and personal advisor coaching. So imagine a situation where compliance at all stages of the advice process is spotting, does this match up with the conversation that the advisor and the client have had? Have Lee and I had a meeting, and Lee said to me, yeah, I'm not that comfortable with risk, Tom. I don't want to go into anything too volatile. We've agreed you're going to be a 4 out of 10 on the risk profile. And then actually somewhere in that kind of advice process, communications falling down with the team, and we're starting to look at a 5 or 6 out of 10 rated fund, like Saturn or AI systems in general will be able to start picking that up to say, actually, this is maybe not the advice that you wanted to give. And that's across 100% of cases.
Yeah, not
And then
just the
advisor,
10% that we spoke about earlier, right? It's across
exactly.
every. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And it just becomes intrinsic into the way that teams are working and
Yeah.
operating. So for the advisors, the power planners, it means that throughout their process, there's no friction point in terms of compliance having to step in. They can just continue to do their work and get kind of prompted if things are kind of being challenged by from a compliance framework. And for the compliance team, it's given them huge transparency into the way that work is being done within their business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just to kind of start moving towards an end, because I appreciate we've got 10 minutes left. I just wanted to highlight a couple of live cases or live examples where firms are already using AI from a compliance standpoint. So first point obviously is around transcription data gathering. Being able to produce a meeting note is great, but moving that into a really structured fact find format where it's very easy to identify what data has been extracted and what data is missing is where the meeting note transcription systems in the market are, not just Saturn, all of the other transcription systems that we work alongside. What we're seeing in there is a huge increase in advisor capacity and a massive reduction in the time it takes to produce very compliant and also, I think, really importantly, uniform outputs across the advice team. That standardization of outputs from a notes perspective is great for the power planner, but it also makes it very easy for the compliance team to see what has been done and what has been said. Starting to push that data then into CRM systems and also then reporting back on that conversation is again where compliance benefits. One of the key areas that we've seen meeting note transcription hugely focus on is vulnerability detection.
Mhm.
So the
Yeah.
FCA last year said 53% of UK advised adults are vulnerable. I've still yet to meet a firm that agree with that statistic. Like the FCA is saying 53%. A lot of firms are saying, nah, it's 10%, 15%.
Yeah.
Some even lower. Some I spoke to an advisor a couple of weeks ago, said, I don't have any vulnerable clients. I disagree with that for sure. I think everyone's got vulnerabilities in some shape or form. But
Yeah.
the key thing is how do we create uniform vulnerability detection across the industry? And by using AI systems that have been trained on the FCA handbook to flag those up in meeting notes, gives the advisor that data and information to either act on it or just to be aware of it.
Yeah.
And then from a compliance team's perspective, it can be automated to report into that firm. So health vulnerabilities in this firm situation has risen by 5% in the last 6 months. Resilience has decreased by 2%. All of this NI and information is not available to financial planning businesses right now, but transparency and AI can give compliance teams that. Would love to speak to Rock Wealth about how reporting like that is going to decrease risk and ultimately premiums to businesses. I think that is a fundamental fiscal benefit that hopefully we could see from AI. And then it's the data transfer. It's this handover of actions from a meeting into the support staff. Task management is a huge thing. And we see firms using task management systems in a whole variety of different tech stacks.
Mm.
So Monday.com, Microsoft Planner, obviously IO, Planner, Xplan have all got their own task management systems. These tasks can be automated from systems and then fed directly into CRM. So that handover of processes can be really, really smooth. So from a compliance standpoint as well, being able to track what was created from the meeting, who was responsible for it, and where it is in that kind of completion process, I suppose, is again really, really useful information. You'll hear us talk a lot about single sources of truth, and everyone in the industry is talking about it right now. For me, it's about firms being able to have the ability to take back control over their data. And unfortunately, that fragmentation of data means that firms don't really have control over their client information, and it makes it very difficult for them to be able to operate as a business. By using systems that are integrated into CRM systems or cash flow and things like that, and into an environment that could be a CRM, it could be a data lake or warehousing. If anyone's interested in that, we're having a lot of chats with very big firms in the industry about centralizing client data. But all of that means that single sources of truth can give us much better client insights and then move that data into recommendation reporting. One of the things that I'm really excited about is enabling the compliance part of report writing to be automated as much as possible, i.e., taking risk profile discussions and capacity for loss discussions and vulnerabilities and goals and objectives, moving them into very personalized and bespoke documents with as little human interaction as possible. The benefit for me on that is that actually firms have the capacity to think about the advice delivery. If you think about the way that firms operate right now, so much of it is focused on the documentation that
Mm.
goes into advice,
Yeah.
and not as much as I think everyone
Yeah.
would like is focused on the actual delivery of that advice. So for me, if we can try and support firms on making this process as efficient as possible, and there's a number in there that ongoing suitability production in 10 minutes, again, not just speed, but actually making sure we're doing that in the right way from a compliance standpoint, firms can start to think about how clients want to receive that advice. And that for me is a really exciting future.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then quality monitoring. So training, meeting observations. I think this is going to be a big thing that firms are moving at in the future. Just the last poll question for me was, what do you see compliance as? I was quite interested just to understand the perception, I suppose, of people within financial planning businesses as to what the view on compliance is within their business.
Also conscious of time, but I've got a question I'll ask you.
Cool.
Do you think humans in compliance, so people that play the compliance role, the physical person, the physical body in the room, is holding back AI in the financial planning world? There's a thing that people talk about compliance vision. For example, we just helped an advisor move from one network to another network. One network wouldn't entertain it because all of the boxes wasn't ticked, and everything wasn't where it should be, and the human oversight on that advisor, if you like, was just not. It just wasn't a 10 out of 10. Where another firm got the advisor authorized in 10 days because they took a bit more of an open view to it, and they sat down, they looked at it from both sides, and had a more of a thoughtful process around it. Is it similar with AI? If you've got somebody at the forefront of compliance within their business and they're dead against AI, is that going to be a bottleneck for someone?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I'm not really seeing that, to be honest. I mean, I think
Good.
actually a lot of our conversations is driven by compliance teams because they want this better access and transparency around client interactions. They appreciate that, having a more human intervention in there is going to slow things down further. It's great to see the poll results here. 25% of people say it's an enabler of trust and client confidence, competitive advantage for two people. Those are really optimistic ways of thinking about compliance.
Mm,
Um, like I'd be lying if I said there's compliance teams that I've worked with that don't want to work with AI. They think about mostly data security. But I think fundamentally, when you can work with firms to let them see how using a financial planning specific AI company can kind of negate some of those
mm,
compliance concerns, and then they can start to see the benefit. And I think for me, it's actually making sure that compliance are fully involved in any AI project that you're doing, both from data security, but also the kind of fundamental benefit.
yeah, yeah, that's awesome.
Cool. Well, I appreciate we're very near to time, so just wanted to finish off. Just trying to get this poll off my screen, actually.
Have you got it off? I've moved it from mine.
Yeah, I've got it.
There you
So
go.
just to kind of wrap up, I suppose. So from my perspective, I think data and AI is going to fuel business growth, and that comes from fundamentally owning your data.
Yeah.
AI can centralize data, extract it from various sources, put it in a position where people have transparency, and transparency and data integrity are the two things that I think compliance teams should be striving towards. And then finally, a reflection is what would the impact be on your business if compliance had full transparency? I'd love people to take that question away, have a think about it. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn, email, WhatsApp, call, whatever. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as a reflection. But ultimately, I think AI is not here to replace humans. It's here to amplify human creativity and ingenuity. It's my favorite quote on AI from Gini Rometty, who was the old CEO of IBM. Like I
Yeah.
think it's so true in our industry that it's a human-led industry. We need to move human beings away from working like machines and enable us to focus on being humans. And I think that is a really exciting future for our industry.
Amazing. Look at that with 60 seconds, 60 seconds spare there. Martin, glad you found that interesting. And look, I do encourage those that are not using it yet or just tinkering on the edge of AI. I'm sure Tom's got some time that you can put aside to speak to you, just to really show you the benefits of what AI can have in your business. We spoke about not having enough time and running 110 mile an hour at the very beginning. And we see club members in that situation all of the time. Sometimes it's just taking that little bit of time out, implement something, a bit of tech, a bit of AI, and start running at 80 miles an hour, not 110 miles an hour. You're still going to have to run fast. You're still doing plenty of things within your business. but just implementing tech just gives you a little bit more time where you can potentially run a little bit slower. So please do complete some feedback just so we know we delivered on what we said we was going to deliver. Let us know if you want to interact with Tom and Saturn, vice versa. If you want to interact with the club or come to our event, let us know. Great session. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Yeah, Graham, carve out some time, come to Birmingham. Is it? We'd love to see you there. Yeah, absolutely. Birmingham's been a tough one for us in terms of transport links and getting people in Birmingham. We speak to a lot of collaborators to go, why are you doing an event in Birmingham? Nobody does one in Birmingham. He's like, that's exactly why we're doing one in Birmingham, because nobody goes to Birmingham. So any questions, if anybody's got any final questions, please do let us know. If not, have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you next Friday, 10 a.m. Chris is loving
Thanks, everyone.
Saturn. Look at that.
We love you too, Chris. Thanks, everyone.
Uh,
Have a great weekend.
and you. Thanks, Tom.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.